Welcome again to the Clinical Cookout. I'm here, Auntie Sug, and I'm here to bring you the psychoeducation. Let's go. Today, I'm going to be talking about ADHD. Well, we are going to be talking about ADHD. And the reason why I say we is because I have a very special guest, and you guys might know her. Her name is Auntie Kesh. And Auntie Kesh is coming because Auntie Kesh is very well versed on the subject. She knows a little bit about a little bit, so let's go.
Hey, Auntie Sug in the building.
So, I'm so happy to have you as my guest, peasant. I mean, as my guest.
Hot mess. You a mess.
But let's talk about ADHD because I get so many people that's like, ADHD is so new, and how come it's like a buzzword these days? And all these kids don't have ADHD. People are just making this up, and y'all just want to diagnose somebody with something. Why?
No. ADHD. They at least think that it was like first traced back to like Henry VIII, I believe, like back in the 1700s. So yeah, way back in the day. They went back.
Right. Well, you know, they talk about Shakespeare, because Shakespeare was so flighty and all over the place, and Shakespeare was super creative, never could sit down, never, just always had to be doing something. And my supervisor, he's super funny. He's always talking about Einstein, and it's like, you know, the fact that Einstein didn't even speak until he was like 4. So like there's something, I mean, 4. He had to be like some kind, you know, I mean, he was a little bit spectrumy. I'm not sure, but when it comes to that, think about it. He's not talking until he's 4, and then he's coming out with all these E equals MC square, all these concepts. Like, and if you think about it, like, you know what I mean? Those are our creatives, those are our geniuses. And people don't recognize the genius that sometimes come with children, adults, and other people who have ADHD. That's why we have all these like luxuries, and like, you know, that's why we could watch all these shows and we're like, oh man, it's good, because you had that mind that was constantly twirling it, you know what I mean, just constantly going to create all of this stuff. There, a lot of times they're creatives.
Right. I think that people probably also didn't feels like it's new because I mean, literally the ADHD diagnosis didn't get in the DSM until 1987. So if we're going all the way back to the 1700s and you have all these symptoms and people are like, what is this? Maybe people was like, it's new because they didn't really know. They didn't know like what the actual term was. So it didn't come around until like, at first I think it was ADD, and then they changed it to in 1987 to ADHD.
So, and I like that you said that. It's important to clarify that because ADD literally stands for attention deficit disorder. ADHD is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. It's all really ADHD, not ADD. It's under the ADHD umbrella, and you might have inattentive type or impulsive type. So it's 2 different types, but it's all under an ADHD umbrella. And I thought that was a good thing to clarify.
Yeah, it is a good thing to clarify because a lot of people don't know that those terms, they try to interchange, is that the term, interchangeably use those terms, but not really knowing like, no, the term was upgraded because we have to include the rest of the criteria of inattentiveness, hyperactivity, and then I believe there's a third one combined, so you can have both.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yep, there is combined in this, you know, I mean, it's in the DSM-5. So you know a lot about ADHD in kids. I also see kids as well. So let's talk about some ADHD in children.
Yeah. So a lot of times, you know, ADHD is literally something that people, I hate to say it, but they like throw this term out there when it comes to kids, especially when a kid is like very antsy, impulsive, or inattentive. It's immediately ADHD without understanding that there are other disorders that could overlap with that. And on top of that, developmental. So sometimes a kid's attention span is only 4 or 5 minutes because that's the normal level of attention span. But it's often confused when it comes to children. They're automatically labeled. And I think that's one of the things that I try to help parents realize when I'm testing them, that other disorders can be at play. But before we get there, I always like to do, we always talk about the research aspect of it. And we always like to include the indicators of ADHD. So one of the ways you can do that is looking at the research when it comes to supporting the hereditary factors of ADHD. So say grandma, Back in the day, we didn't know why grandma was impulsive or grandpa was impulsive or inattentive, right? So, okay, now it skips mom and dad, and then it comes down to the child. And a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people don't know that it's hereditary, and it can be hereditary.
Mm.
It's like 80% when they did the research with twins, like monozygote twins. So that's basically identical twins. It was an 80% rate that it could be hereditary. So I wanted to clear that up when it comes to does your kid have ADHD? Maybe. And it's probably best if you look back in your family line to look at that to see who may have had it. Because it could
So
be a strong.
another thing too, when you talk about hereditary, we do genograms. The first thing we do in like our psycho evaluations, we do genograms. So before I even get to writing, like what are they allergic to, or what are the symptoms, I put, who's mom, who's dad, who's this, who's that, who do they live with, who is grandma in the house, and then you start to go into who might have had certain disorders, or who might have looked like they had it, who might not be diagnosed, and who do you expect? Because a lot of times, if you look down the family line, it might not only even be mom or dad. And
Right.
my supervisor likes to say 9 times out of 10, if it's mom or dad and it's or somebody else in the house, somebody else in the house is going to have it. And I think
Right.
that people get stigmatized. They get it in their head as a stigma, and so they
Yeah.
don't want to say that it might be hereditary, when honestly it really is.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that that's so important to make sure that genogram is done so that way we can get a better picture with going to get evaluated if you want to, making sure that, hey, let's cross off everything, let's look at everything. I think one of the things I think with genograms is important because so many trials have been done. ADHD is more of a male based diagnosis, and so a lot of girls get skipped over because research is pretty much supporting ADHD when it comes to males versus females. And so I think it's important to address little girls too when
Yeah.
it comes to that. And I think we don't want to always look at our little girls as being inattentive or hyperactive, or we often. Now, this is not to say we do, but there may be a more targeted. It may be more targeted with the girl being bad or acting like the boys, when in actual reality she may be ADHD, and we missed over it because she's not properly diagnosed. So, just being aware of that with children.
Well, one thing also is my daughter has ADHD, right? So she would sit in the classroom. She was not a disruption. She would just sit there, and I was like, "Oh my God, look at her grades. What is going on?" I know she's smart. I speak to her, and because she wasn't a problem, she was looked over. And until we had to have that, like, the SBLC meeting, that meeting with the school, then it was like, well, what could be going on? So we found out that she was sitting there, and she's not hyperactive. She's not impulsive. She's not disrupting the class. She's not excessively talking, but she's not paying attention. So she's sitting there
Right.
and she's in a whole new world. And so
Yeah.
that's another reason why girls get skipped over. When most of the times you expect a little girl that's talking too much, that's going around the class, that can't sit down, that's constantly bothering the boys, constantly nagging, constantly doing things. Those are the ones that get diagnosed more often.
Yep. 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 And I'm glad you did. You say your daughter was 12?
Yes.
So typically that's the age that we diagnose them by. So for the parents and for the audience out there, your child typically, at least according to research, will be showing some level of inattentiveness or impulsivity, or even a combination of both before the age of 12, whether that's in a school setting or home setting. That being aware of that before the age of 12 is very important, because that's typically when we diagnose them.
So one thing it is important to notice is that as your child gets older, so even though Auntie Kesh said before 12, sometimes it is definitely like before 12 is actually good, because maybe by the time they hit third, fourth, fifth grade, even sometimes sixth grade, things start getting harder. There's more demands. The child has to do more things at school. They have to give certain papers to their teachers. They have to bring things home. You might start seeing the ball drop in some areas. And it's important just to notice that, because when they are doing that, it could be inattentiveness or the forgetfulness, or their executive functioning is literally compromised in a person with ADHD. So organization skills might be compromised. Just constantly having sensory overload, thinking too many things at one time, trying to do too many things at one time. I was doing this task and okay, my brain thought about something else. Now I have to go do this task. And sometimes people get so overwhelmed and so overloaded that they just shut down and don't do anything.
Yeah, yeah. I was also reading in some of the research about how moms may be more likely to see the behaviors more because they're more of considered the custodian parent, and
Mhm.
so when you are typically with your child all the time, it's important to continue to address those things. And whatever you see, it's important to let the other parent know or the other caregivers know, hey, this is what I'm seeing. Are you seeing the same thing? That way, they can also be aware of those symptoms as well. Typically, children, and I know we haven't gotten to interventions yet, but I can say this that children tend to do better with adults versus group settings. There could be way too many stimulating things going on, way too many conversations, way too many things at play. So, them working with an adult, possibly in a one on one, versus working with a group could be easier for them or to avoid those overstimulating situations.
Mhm. And you know what? We did say a lot about overstimulation, and you
Mhm.
talked about parents seeing that in their kids. And we get a lot of people who come in and they're like, I see the same thing in me that I see in my kids, or vice versa. And
Mhm.
so let's talk about ADHD in adults, because
Mhm.
ADHD in adults, you talk about executive functioning, adults get overloaded fast. But we do get overloaded fast because think about a mother or even a father, single father, single mothers, whatever have you. You're taking care of kids, you're taking care of finances, there's household tasks, you have to work, there's whatever other activities that you have on top of the kids' activities.
Right.
That sometimes is sensory overload. And so sometimes you'll see people losing their keys, people getting in, what I mean? Just any little thing happening and people breaking down because it's like I can't keep up with all of this. And
Right.
that's one of the ways that it's either ADHD or anxiety, or ADHD and anxiety comorbid. Because if
Mhm.
you have ADHD and you don't know and you can't keep up with a whole bunch of things that are going on and you just dropping balls everywhere, it could be
Mhm.
because you're overloaded, or it could be because you have symptoms of ADHD and compromised executive functioning.
Yep, I would agree. I think that since we've been in the pandemic and things have kind of, been brought to the forefront, exposing our mental health system, a lot
Mhm.
of people were getting tested and they were saying, finally, I found an answer that I'm ADHD. And this whole time, like I've been struggling all these years, trying to keep up with things, trying to, stay on task, trying not to forget things, and literally this whole time they've had ADHD. They either was just misdiagnosed or wasn't diagnosed at all. So,
Mhm.
it's important for you guys to get that education, not education, but get that assessment as, where you can. If
Mhm.
you notice that you've been trying to put in certain interventions and it's not working, or feeling
Mhm.
like, hey, I have slowed down, but I'm still, my my thoughts still are scrambled, or I
Yeah.
can't slow down, or I'm making impulsive decisions without even thinking about it, and just things of that nature. There may be a time for you to be assessed. So,
Mhm.
but I
And
like how you brought up. I like how you brought up mood or other disorders, because ADHD is very prevalent and diagnosed with other mood disorders and other anxiety disorders. Now,
Mhm.
just to clarify to everybody, ADHD is not a mood disorder. It is a neurological disorder.
Yes.
It is diagnosed with mood disorders. So just to clarify that. But go
Mhm.
ahead, Shug, with the comorbidity
Well,
on
you
that.
kind of hit on that, is that that is diagnosed with other disorders, but also it's not only a childhood disorder, it's an adult disorder. And I think that some people with ADHD think that they just lazy or they don't have willpower, and it's like it's not even about that.
Yeah.
Even in adults, if you have everything to do, if you find yourself cleaning the kitchen, but then you saw that the laundry needed to be folded, so you stopped in the middle of cleaning the kitchen and you had to go fold the laundry real quick. But then you thought about that stain that was on the bathroom floor and you better hurry up and go get it up before the guests come. And then all of a sudden you're doing all these little things and you're getting all sidetracked. And then all of a sudden you just want to go sit down and now you're not doing anything.
Mhm.
That could be sensory overload. That's
Yeah.
that could be the deficit in your executive functioning. That's why
Yep.
some people have so much to do that they just say it's too much to do, I'm not doing anything. And
Right.
adults do that just as well as kids.
Yep. And I think that there's something to be said about having to switch to those different tasks or something not being done, because then you're quick to be impulsive to anger and to
Mhm,
frustration. So your tolerance is very low because
mhm.
you have so much going on. So,
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, people may see you be very moody because all these things are going on. So, it's a common thing or a common observation to see someone with ADHD to have a increased mood.
yeah. And also too, like adults with ADHD, it could look like car accidents, right? Because now you're driving, you're missing lights, you're not paying attention to things sometimes. Have you ever been driving and like you're like, how did I get here? When did I get to this light? That
What happened?
like, how did I get here? Because you know you didn't teleport, but sometimes you go on autopilot. You might not have been paying attention the whole time. Some of that can be inattentive, can be inattentiveness. Just not paying attention, blowing stop signs, constantly getting caught speeding. That impulsivity mixed with the inattention can be detrimental in the life of adults, and it can look like that. So
Yep.
the biggest question is, what can we do about it?
I'm so glad you said that, show. We can definitely wrap up by telling them some intervention. So one of those things that I'd love to say is early assessments. Get your kid or yourself in
Mhm.
somewhere, and no, you don't always have to go to a private practitioner. You can go to your local community mental health center that pretty much maybe accepts sliding fee scale for testing, or it may even be free depending on your insurance. But early assessment, excuse me, early assessment is very, very important because it can detect any type of deficiencies, deficits that may be there, and things of that nature. What do you got, Shug?
Um, for your child, a lot of people think it's going to be super expensive to take them to go get examined or go get an assessment. I'm sorry, but you can take them to your pediatrician. There are pediatricians who diagnose ADHD every single day. Now, a pediatrician is not a specialist by any means, but they can also give you, certain little tests that can get you to they can give you certain little tests, and maybe sometimes they give out medication that can get people to the point of seeing the actual specialist to diagnose ADHD. And it's not just somebody looking at your kid, contrary to popular belief, saying, is he hyper? He got ADHD. That's definitely not what's going on.
No.
There are assessments that can be done. There is we gather tons of medical history, tons of family history, and we see what's going on with the kid at that point. We gather history from school. So none of the tests are definitive, but together everything can make a good diagnostic picture.
Yes, that's a good word. Good diagnostic picture. I like that.
Thank you.
One of the one of the other things we use is can be used is like daily report cards. What I mean by that is typically with kids, you can document specific behaviors and provide feedback. You can also target specific behaviors that you want to change or you want to see change. So a daily report card is important. So that way you can track whether for yourself or for your children.
hmm And also with the daily report card, it's good to give, especially kids and yourself, those short little bursts, right? Well, that's why you might see kids playing video games because it's like ping, 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 ping. Your pleasure centers are just getting so much pleasure from little things. So the kids that I see with ADHD, I do this little therapy app where I adapted it and I make it like, okay, how good did you do in how good did you do in school for the week? And just those little point systems gets their pleasure centers going. They're like, oh, I did good today. I get a point. Oh my goodness, if I get how many points, what reward do I get? And I will sit in the office and I'll say, you get 10 minutes of screen time and I will not bother you because you know what, you deserve this and you earned it. And just those little earned rewards is enough to keep kids going and able to make them accountable until they can kind of grow into what's going on.
Yeah, I agree. Also, so with people, this is a statistic with high schoolers, they tend to drop out more if they have ADHD. So when I was reading some research, they talked about the check and connect. So if you're seeing a child who is falling behind or struggling with their grades, it's important to check in and have them connect to a mentor or someone that can lead them around the right path to get the intervention that they need or the support that they need. So check and connect is very, very good for your older kids that typically don't possibly want to say what's going on. So sometimes we have to initiate that as adults.
Yep.
And I think last but not least is, of course, this may not be everybody's go-to, but we always want to encourage you to consult with your psychiatrist or your medical profession about medication. ADHD is very effective, or can be addressed effectively with medication, and that has been proven over time. So,
and I know medication is like this. It's the taboo word, right? But if your child needed glasses, you wouldn't withhold their glasses from them because they couldn't see. You wouldn't withhold their glasses from them and say, you know what, just go ahead and struggle to see. That can be what it's like for somebody with severe ADHD to not have medication. It's like
yeah.
withholding something that can make them see better. Can they see? Yes. Are they straining? Yes. Are they getting the side effects like a headache? Yes. With ADHD, can they function? Absolutely. Are they functioning well? Maybe not. Are the symptoms hurting them? Yes. So if you see that the symptoms are unbearable, it's absolutely okay. I'm giving you the go ahead to go get your child some medication, because you know what? Research has shown that when medication is taken correctly, and this is what you're supposed to be doing anyway, right? Teaching somebody how to take medication correctly. That when medication is taken correctly, as that child is growing, they're learning good habits. So they're learning good habits. Their brain is functioning in the good way. Over time, we hope that medication is not needed. Some people who've taken ADHD medication as a kid have not needed it as an adult.
I agree. Thank you, Auntie Shook, for having me on for psychoeducation regarding ADHD. It's been a pleasure, and I can't wait for us to do it again.
My goal is always to make sure that you guys have a good takeaway and that you learn. So that's all I have. Auntie Shug signing out.